I'm gonna start this off with a huge little warning. If you haven't completed the Archon quests for Fontaine yet, or the Fontaine side quests, turn away from this video. There is some huge spoilers as well as some things that I noticed from those quest lines. So yeah, turn it off if you haven't completed them yet. But for those of you who have, I want to know your opinions after this. So please feel free to leave a comment in the comments about what you think. So, starting off with the Archon quest for Fontaine, we really quickly meet, the Hydro God, which she's not at all what we kind of expect from gods, and she's a little bit dramatic and egotistical, which is kind of interesting. And then we meet, obviously, Lene and Lynette, and then we, do a bunch of stuff for them, go to the big magic show, and then the magic show turns into a murder mystery, which honestly is really cool. And at that point, I'm like, well, that's a little weird that, just turning into a murder mystery. Oh no, it gets so much weirder. And I mean by so much, it's just, it's not at all what you would be expecting. So after doing all of the like ace detective kind of things and, you know, going through the courthouse and figuring out all of the missing things and doing the court case, we find out that Lene's little helper is the one that was trying to kidnap a girl, and the girl happened to not be Fontaine, and because of that, she didn't turn into water, which is a huge revelation. People from Fontaine freaking turn into water when a certain water source from the Primordial Sea is dropped on them, which is really weird. And it's really weird how they bring this up. So if she comes out and explains what was happening and that she accidentally killed him without realizing it, and it's this huge conspiracy. And there's so many more questions after that. But while doing that quest line and helping out Lene, we meet Navia, who, has a murder mystery of her own, except it's her own father. Her father was falsely accused of committing a murder, and she knows he's innocent. So then when we start, revisiting it, and we realize that there was clothes left at this crime scene, and the person was probably turned into water, just like what was trying to be happen to the girl at Lene's show. So now the question is, who the heck is turning these people into water? When we first walk into Fontaine, we're introduced to the serial case of the disappearing girls. And I think girls is not the right word for them. They're women, and we do know this after we see their image. And we go through this whole thing, and it's honestly wild. The storyline gets so weird, because we find out that originally, um, Uncle Marcus was basically a adventurer, and his, girlfriend at the time got dissolved into the water because she was from Fontaine, and he wasn't. So it adds so much more mysteries. And then we find out that instead of just being, sad about it, he goes and kidnaps girls for years to turn them into water to try to reverse the thing. And he couldn't figure it out. And after all of that, then we, like dumbasses, lead him to this water fountain, which was calling out to us. And all of the dead girls whose souls in essence now live in the water freaking murder his ass. Like, that was a wild story from start to finish. I, I don't know who wrote the Archon questline for this area, but who hurt you? Who hurt you? Who came up with the idea of something so menacingly evil like that? Like, it's crazy. Up next, we're gonna talk about the other side quests and how they all connect, because it's very interesting. And the first side quest that I did, and you can probably do this in any order. This is just the order that I did it in. We meet a diver who is very suspicious, and he takes us to this place. And if you're looking at this place, you're like, what in the heck is this? It is right here. It's called the Institute of Natural Philosophy. And he tries to say it's like this evil goer form and all of this other stuff. But in actuality, it looks like it's an abandoned research institute, that something tragic happened here. And we realize very quickly that, everything here isn't exactly what it seemed. They were doing some suspicious tests with rune guards and other electronic items that are a little bit suspicious. And we went through a little bit of this in the diver's quest. And then he, betrays us. We get Big Sag. And then we get revenge on him a little bit later. But that's not where the story ends, which is the interesting part. So this is the part that we got to in the first area, which is with the diver. Then you go over here and you meet a little oceanid. The little oceanid says they need help, saving your kingdom, which I mean, if you look at this looks like a kingdom. And very quickly it becomes super apparent that there's something very suspicious happening here. Because there's Anne the Oceanid who introduces us to her crew, and everyone has like completely different ideas on what's happening. Some of them, are military agents, other ones are orchestra teams, and then there's the ones that think that they're, knights saving a princess, and it becomes very weird super quickly because it's obvious that this wasn't a kingdom, but was something else. Then, as we explore and listen to their stories, we find the statue of this girl, and they say that's the princess. And right around here, we meet a dog, air quotes, that's a, oceanid boar. And for some reason, they all think it's a dog that was supposed to be protecting the princess. So as the story progresses, we go right through there, that beautiful little tower with the water dragon on it, to go rescue said princess. But instead of it being a princess, it's a teleporter. And it takes us to another area. And after reading this, you can tell that this is not an actual history that happened. It's a story in this storybook right here next to this statue. Of course, for some reason, Anne, who we're helping, doesn't know this. And it becomes very apparent super quickly as we go through the story that she has no idea what's happening until she goes through the portal. So let me take you guys through the portal just because it's very interesting on where it goes. It's even more interesting because all of the other little oceanid characters, had gave up their. Oh shit! I went a little too high. It's fine. All the other ones went and turned into this little bubble. So the only one left that remembers the story of the princess is Anne, who we take through this kind of adventure and figure out that Anne remembers a lot more than just the princess story, which is a little suspicious. So we go through this little portal, and where does it take us? That's right. Back to the institute that we were previously in. And this is a whirlwind chase where, keep trying to find the princess. We keep trying to find the princess, and we cannot find the princess anywhere. You go through 3 different levels, which look identical. And then finally, at the last one, you get this like sword, which is a toy sword, and she remembers the kids playing with it. But this is where the story starts getting a little crazy. There's a book which you find, and the book teleports you to a separate world. But there's someone named Mary Ann, which is actually very funny for its source material, which is listed as the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland. And this girl starts talking and doesn't understand what's happening, and neither does Anne. But then at the very end, the girl shows us to her dog, who's the same exact boar from the other story. And then after that, she tells us she doesn't want us to have this become our tomb too, and pushes us through, and this entire area that we were in with her floods. So very quickly, if you start reading the lore in this area through the books, you've come to realize that this institute 500 years ago, during the collapse of Conria, was in operation, and there was a whole group of like orphans and people's whose parents were criminals that lived here, and they worked under a director. And they did testing, and it seems like these stories were something that the kids had written or like learned during the storyline, and it's really dark because it's implied that everyone here, besides a couple people, which will come up in the other quests, is dead. And they have been dead for a very long time. But the question asks, who are the people that are still in the stories? Were they actual people at one point? Who knows? It's very interesting that that's kind of how this works. So it's very kind of crazy, and if you just keep going through, it just keeps leading you back to the same places, which is a little bit suspicious at first. But if you think about it, if they're doing testing, which there's certain rooms in this institute, which by the way, this one is part of, this version. But this is the actual institute here, which you can go through. And you can like look through the areas and you find some really weird stuff. Like this is the way you come in through the diver, and you're like, oh, this is just a water classed area, not a big deal. But then it becomes very apparent that all of these things are linked, whether through one reason or another, by this loss, this huge collapse of whatever this institute was doing, and as well as they were doing experiments that are a little bit unknown even now. We have some of their data logs, but that's not all of them. We don't have all of the data logs. We don't know what happened to certain people, but it does appear like it has been recently used because there's some torches lit, which begs the question on who, after 500 years, is alive. Which we do kind of find out the answer to in the next side quest, which is kind of a huge thing. But from what you can see from everything, there seems to be a lot of stuff that was from Conria, which is weird because this is before the collapse. So why were they studying Conria? There's so many questions, like what happened? What caused all of this stuff? And like if you look around, this was probably a very cutting edge institute at one point. But now all of this stuff has been lost to the ages, for 500 years. And it's very, very creepy and ominous that all of these stories are starting to connect. Because who knows what's going to happen. There's also this room, which you can't do anything with, but if you notice, some of this stuff has appeared in other places in Genshin, which is really weird. So I'm curious to see how this part ends up. But for now, we're going to jump to the next story, which is the tale of Mamere, which she is from the Miracia village, and she's this nice little, character who likes to do art and is very sweet. But for some reason, this human named Jacob keeps asking for her art. And she doesn't want to sell it for money. She wants to give it as a gift, but he keeps trying to forcibly take her art. And through the adventures, we help her make more paints, which was used by destroying like rocks and stuff in this area over here. And we come to find out after we got back from destroying these rocks that Jacob was searching her house for something. And he mentions, and I kid you not, that her art is shit and he is not interested in her art. So, what is he interested in? And that is the question. Who is Jacob and why is he interested in Mamere's, paintings for some reason? So, it turns out this area and the other one, there's these little things here that you use to shoot to break the things to get the like paint and everything. I wish that was just like the end of it, but as you go through, you find out that Mamere is able to hear, and I kid you not, she's able to hear a voice in her head called Father. And we don't know who Father is at this point. But if you look here, this is Father's heart. And after helping out all of the other, you know, people that live in the Mara Sea to help her, you come to find out that you can go here after and you have to save people and you get to talk to Father, which is in this area. But right before that, you fight Jacob, who turns out to be a a mage who can use abyss powers, but is not an abyssal mage, which is kind of weird. What becomes weirder is he yells at her robo dog, Mamere's robo dog, and says you were supposed to be watching Mary Ann. Mary Ann is the name of the character that was in the one storybook that mentioned the fact that it was a tomb and you didn't want to stay there. So that means Jacob, who, is this abyssal mage, was the Jacob from the Institute this entire time. And for some reason, he was trying to reactivate the heart of the father, which the father explains that if he were to reawaken, everyone's area on this land would be destroyed, so he doesn't want to be reawakened. So why does Jacob want to reawaken the father? Why does he know about the father? And a better question is, why is he an abyssal mage? Does that mean that they were Conrians at this institute? There's so many questions to be answered. And unfortunately, this questline ends with Seymour, Mamere's puppy, realizing that he was supposed to be watching Marianne and he wants to go find Marianne, but there's no Finding Marianne quest yet. As of right now, there is no way to finish the quest line, which is a little bit sad. But if you go around and you help the other people of the Marasi village after you complete this quest line, you can find out other bits of information. Like one of them is in this water area, if you try potions, you see a ship. And then by talking to one of the other Marasi, you figure out that this is not just a ship. This is the ship of Captain Basil, the same Captain Basil who was part of the Institute and one of the few people who survived. And his ship crashed, and there's no information after that. So the question now is so much bigger. Who are all these people at the Institute? Why are they all intertwined and in different parts of the story? And we don't know yet, unfortunately, because we're going to have to wait until they add, I guess, another side story in about these characters, hopefully soon. But this is a hugely tragic tale from both the Archon quest and the side quests that paint this picture of just absolute tragedy. These characters 500 years ago, something terrible happened while the Conria conflict was happening, and we don't know what happened. We don't know who survived. We don't know if they were trapped in those stories and that's them. We have no idea yet. There's so many more questions we want answers to. What were they experimenting on? What were they using the Conria tech for? Why is Jacob now an abyssal mage? So I really hope Genshin answers these questions because this is the most depressing storylines I've ever seen. And it just feels like somebody needs a hug at, their headquarters, whoever's writing the side stories. Because all of these are so tragic and really depressing, and they're all linked, which means that they all had to sit down and create this storyline of this tragic, death of these characters. As well, well, the area is not currently available. If while you're on the little tram to get to the capital, there is an area which is floating, and they mentioned that's the Institute. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same institute that we see that's also collapsed here, but the question remains, are we going to get more information on what was happening in this institute? What else does Genshin have for us to cry about? Honestly, it's been really depressing reading all of these storylines, reading the tabs, and figuring out they're all connected and making a big question. So I really hope that Genshin actually gives us some information here soon. Hopefully at 4.1, because I don't know how long I want to wait to get all these answers, especially with how intense the story is. But I would love to know your thoughts on all of the new Genshin lore that we just got, as well as do you feel like this expansion storyline is too depressing or and too kind of bizarre? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching.